Hey, Fanboy Nation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
We're watching Fanboy.
A fanboy, etc.
Fanboy Nation.
Dot, I assume Tom.
Coming this Tuesday from Well Go Films, a film called Cold Bone, which can be either, you can take it as an alien military flick or an allegory for what I prefer to use the old World War I term as shell shock versus PTSD. We're talking to the writer-director today, Billy Hanson. How are you today?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
Listen, I'm excited to talk to you. This was a fun film. It's got elements of Predator. It's got elements of Gray being in the wilderness. You're using a lot of natural light to film this. You know, what was the catalyst to want to write a movie like Bone Cold?
So, you know, this movie was pretty unique for the way that I usually do things. It started with a single image that sort of popped into my head, and I just saw a guy holding a rifle running through the snowy woods with a creepy monster in the distance behind him, and that sort of stuck with me for some reason. So I just started pulling apart the image and asking myself who this guy was, what this monster was, and this story grew very organically from that. And so, yeah, it just sort of took on a life of its own at one point.
Yeah, this film is beautifully shot. The relationship between the two main characters of John and Marco, played by Matt Munroe and Jonathan Stoddard. Am I pronouncing it?
Stoddard, yeah. Stoddard.
Thank you. You know, it is incredible. It's these brothers in arms that keep getting pulled back into these missions when they're all on the verge of retirement. And I'm not giving too much away. This is all in the trailer, so you guys can see it. So don't sit there and go, oh my God, he gave the entire movie away and he ruined it for us. No, go ahead and watch this on Tuesday when it comes out.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I'm really proud of about the movie is that pretty much everyone that watches it that doesn't know the story top to bottom is very surprised by it. Like, you know, everyone has sort of one idea of it going in, and pretty much everybody is surprised at where it goes. So yeah, that's some people go action movie, and it's not just that. Some people expect just a horror movie. It's not just that. So yeah, I like something for everybody. Sure.
Absolutely. And the psychological aspect that goes into this. And I'm like, wow, he gave us a twist ending that didn't make us groan the way some people with $150 million budget do on occasion.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it was, it's a strange movie, but you know, I feel like at the end of it, it all wraps itself up nicely, you know, and it does seem sort of inevitable once you kind of realize what's going on.
You know, and this is more than a one-time watch. That's the beautiful aspect of it. There's so much disposable content out of there that Bone Cold, you're like, wait, what did I miss that we got to this point? That you have to go back and see it a couple of times.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of how it ended up. And, you know, the writing process for it was really fast, which again is not usually my thing. I can write quickly, but I take a lot of time to rewrite and really polish things up. With this thing, we were moving so fast, there wasn't really time to do that. So I was sort of making sense of the story in post, editing and making sure that, you know, we were walking that line between being vague and being confusing, or being like direct or being too on the nose, you know. A lot of that I'd usually work out at the script level, but for this one, we just kind of had to charge forward. So yeah, I'm glad it ended where it did.
Well, there was this little thing called the pandemic that we went through that shut everything down for us, at least here in California. You know, Florida gave it its 2 weeks and then said to hell with you. And then California went full-blown Chicken Little and shut down all of society. Like, I wanted like a sense of normalcy somewhere in the middle of like, let's be cautious with this without destroying society. And then the two coasts had just opposite ends of the spectrum reactions to it.
Yeah, the first like pandemic. No, so we shot this thing in like 2019. We shot in Maine in February of 2019, and then came back to LA, sort of regrouped, shot the rest of the movie in LA in like October, November. And then I think we did some pickup shoots early 2020, and then the world shut down. And basically all of the deals we had for post-production went away. We had a financier that was coming on board that went away. So we really had to regroup. But for about 2 to 3 weeks, we were like, oh, this might be a good thing for us. We can just jam the movie through in these 2 weeks while no one knows what to do. And we can kind of keep our people working. We can take advantage of this time. But then everything kind of started up again. And in post-production, you were going from 10-hour days to 15-hour days during the pandemic. And yeah, it just delayed us for, I think it took 2 full years to get through post-production.
But on the bright side, with having 2 years of time for post-production, you gave us Bone Cold.
I am actually very grateful for that time now, because it did give us time to focus, to really do things the right way, to go through the steps of the process. And if something didn't work, you know what? We'll go back, we'll fix it. We have the time. And yeah, so I am actually grateful for the time that we spent, even though it was 4 long years of slogging through and taking little baby steps forward. I do feel like very confident that we did things the right way.
In making a movie like this, where you sit there and you're able to have the time for editing, but you don't have the time for reshoots, how much stuff from like the original script, because you pretty much went from conception to shooting and polishing the script along the way, did you want to add stuff or take away stuff from the final product that you're like, oh, if we just had 3 more days of pickup, we could have added this scene over here?
Absolutely. Yeah. The original script was much longer. And there were whole other story beats, like storyline, because we could either, we couldn't shoot part of them or couldn't shoot the whole thing. But at the end of the day, it might have been too much anyway. And in conceptualizing it in the early days of writing, I was like, I know some of this is going to get cut, but it's better to have that in my head, to know this kind of happens outside of this story that we're looking at. It really paints a broader picture. So there are definitely things in there that I was hoping we could do, but nothing that I felt hurts the movie for not being in there. I think with what we have, with our limitations, we got a more streamlined story, a more streamlined arc for John. And it's a little clearer, to be honest. Like, if we had shot this initially our third act was going to be like this 45-minute behemoth act, and it would have been cool. It would have made the world much bigger. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? I don't think we need that. I think I may have cut that anyway if we'd shot it. So there was definitely stuff I wish we could have shot. It would have been very cool. But yeah, I mean, again, I'm happy with where the movie landed, and sort of grateful it landed there.
Sometimes that works out for the best. There was a book I actually enjoyed, and this is unrelated to what I'm telling you in a sense of what the origin of the story is, but how it worked out was, like, my dad's from Iran, and so the book Persepolis came out, and then the animated feature came out, and what they took out in the animated feature actually made it more interesting than the book itself. So I can see where you're like, oh, this is great on paper, but would it have worked on digital or on film if we had actually shot it?
Yeah, it just, the idea of broadening the story and sort of making the creature a bigger threat, it is very cool. And I think, like, in a movie, that's still true. But it's not necessarily something we needed to see for this, hour and 50-minute experience that you have. So, yeah, I think you can still sort of feel that it exists in that way.
One thing I also really appreciated with this was it goes back to the old 70s style of filmmaking. In Alien, we didn't see the alien towards the end of the movie. Jaws, we didn't see the shark towards the end of the movie. So what we're picturing psychologically is far more terrifying because we don't see it than if you had just stuck the alien in the very beginning.
Yeah, thank you for that, man. Like, that was a big deal for us. Like, we talked about this creature and how it was going to look and feel, and we talked more about how it was going to feel than it was going to look. So, there's a lot of the movie plays a lot with distance. It's about snipers, and the whole idea is that this creature is inching closer and closer and closer, and John is using smaller and smaller weapons to fight it until it gets as close as it gets. But one of the things that we played with was the idea that your eye will never really land on it. We put it was always the plan to put some digital effects on top of a practical monster to give this surreal, like, ethereal look to it, so that anytime it is up close and in your face, your eyes will still never quite land and focus on it. And I think that really gives it a surreal kind of trippy feel to it. And it never becomes sort of a silly monster guy in a suit kind of thing.
And that's what makes it entertaining. And the monster isn't the focus of the film. That's what's even more fun, because we're looking at the interaction with these soldiers and how they are behaving with it. And this doesn't often happen in the introspective of military films.
Yeah, you know, I'm not a military person. I'm not from a military family, and I'm not part of that culture. So when the story became what it became, and I knew what I was dealing with and what I was talking about, that being like shell shock and PTSD and those kind of things, I did a lot of research and listened to testimony from a lot of people who do suffer from it. And I talked to, you know, an active duty Navy SEAL sniper. We had this big, long conversation about the story. And I really wanted to show this in a different way than I had ever seen it on film before, and or written about or anything. I was really careful not to vilify soldiers, men and women in the armed forces. I was careful not to condemn the work that they do. And you know, I didn't want them to be the monsters. You know, that was really important to me too. And I think just the combination of those three things, it paints an interesting, different picture, that even though there's a creature, it's a little supernatural, it still feels a little more realistic than a lot of other stuff.
Right. And, you know, we've seen those old war photos. Well, I don't know if you have, so I'm not going to speak on your behalf, but several of us have seen those old war photos where they did a side-by-side comparison of a World War II veteran, you know, going to war and then returning home from war. And in the picture, you know, in the first picture, he's looking at you. In the second picture, he's looking through you. And it's almost terrifying how that happens.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the guys that designed the creature suit, his name is Bryan Hillard, and he's done some major stuff. He's very, very cool. He did the Well Walker zombie from The Walking Dead, like season 2, I think. He designed this creature for us, and he with veterans. And he said one of the things that they do sometimes is they'll draw pictures of their fears or like what kind of haunts them. And a lot of the time they draw these silhouetted creatures. And, you know, he said that's what he pulled a lot of inspiration from while designing this thing. So yeah, we pulled from a lot of real life stuff to make this supernatural creature.
And, you know, since you've done your research, thankfully, because not too many people do, you know, they just spout off their opinion in modern filmmaking.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm a critic. I see so many films that I'm just like, look, this is the writer and the director's perspective, not what's going on with people that actually suffer through this, which I'm thrilled that you did that. You know, what has the military's reaction been to this? You know, whether soldiers you've spoken with or veterans you've spoken with that have seen the film, that are like, all right, you know, I can see where you were going with this, and thank you for bringing this to the public's attention.
You know, it's only been a handful of people so far that have seen it. But I leaned pretty heavily on a couple friends who are military, so they knew the story from the beginning, and everyone has been, I think, appreciative, at the very least, of the efforts to get it right and the efforts to not vilify them, or like make them the monsters, you know. And I can tell you Danielle Poblarp, who is the voice of Angel in the movie, so she's like voice actor only. We brought her on because she was a Navy comms officer, so she was like doing that job, basically communicating between ships, communicating with people on the ground. And when she came in, I said, listen, can you and I go through this? And you just kind of tell me if anything hits you the wrong way, if anything is like triggering it all, you know, just tell me if anything pisses you off. And she was very cool about it. She was like, yeah, this doesn't really happen. This doesn't really happen. So we kind of rewrote some of the stuff where we could, to fix it in ADR or to rewrite her dialogue. So all the stuff that she's doing is super accurate and very, and her performance is so cool. It's very like monotone, straightforward, almost robotic, but she's like, yeah, that's what it's like, man. You just communicate. There's no emotion there. But as far as the reaction goes, I haven't shared it too much with military yet. But one of the things that we would like to do, and I know I've talked to Wellgo about it, and they'd like to do it as well, is to have like veteran screenings, to show it to a group of veterans to see how they take it, to see what they think of it. So I'm anxious to hear their reactions to it.
You know what? I have a friend who's in the Marines that works on their entertainment side over there, and I'll give you his contact when we're done with the.
Oh yeah, please do.
And have you go from there.
Please do. Yeah, we're focused on the release right now to get it out there to everybody, and then I think for me, I'm going to try to shift focus and see if we can maybe set up some of those veteran screenings. So that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. What the other aspect of this is that we don't realize with the film, and this is my interpretation, tell me if I'm wrong, is this all a psychological trauma that they're facing? Are they actually experiencing this alien invasion, or what's truly going on? Is this a flashback? Is this the reality? That's what's gripping in this film.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we played a lot with that, like what's real, what's in his head, what's in their heads, because that is what we're dealing with. I read a fantastic article when I started doing research. I believe it was called Invisible Wounds, and how a lot of people come back from the war with conceit, and so they are very real to that person. And that's the line that we were trying to walk with John. So I think your interpretation is not wrong. For me, when I was writing it, it's very much a psychological thing. And while I don't usually focus on like rules with creatures and stuff, I feel like it kind of bogs you down to get tied up in the rules of exactly what happens when this happens, whatever. There are points where only John can see it, and there are points when other people can see it as well. And it's, to me, when the people closest to him see what's happening to him and understand what's happening to John, that's when they can also see the creature too. So it is a bit of a shared delusion, but I have always thought of the creature as, this is John's monster. That is his personal monster. Other people may have their own personal monsters. That's kind of how I've thought about it, but I do kind of love hearing other people's interpretations of it.
Well, I'm trying not to give so much of the film away, because that's how much I enjoyed it, that I was like, and then in this scene over here, and then in the second act, this happened. Like, I don't want to do that to people, because I want them to see the film.
Yeah, I know. I keep trying to figure out like how much to say and how much to talk about, but I mean, I will say, I don't think anything we've said here is going to spoil anything. There's still plenty to you're still going to be surprised by a lot of stuff.
This is what happens when I get excited about a film. Like if I didn't care, it would be very like monotone and staccato, and be like, all right, we're done in 5-10 minutes. Congratulations. Yeah. I mean, it's not that bad, because sometimes the studios only give you 10 minutes, but like, but when we could have a conversation about it, it's like, wow, I'm actually excited about this, because I'm happy that somebody is addressing this, because not too many people do. I mean, we'll see like Black Hawk Down and in the fight and what people are suffering through, but we never see the repercussions of coming home.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really wanted to capture. I think, just taking a step back, looking at it as a film, like what I wanted this film to be, I think about the stuff that I loved growing up when I was really like learning film and falling in love with it. It's like all the 90s action movies that had all these great action scenes and like, these big violent set pieces that are so cool. And then, I wanted to sort of take that and hold on to it for a minute and be like, wait, what happens after that? Like, what happens when things calm down, when they're not in this extreme situation? So, in Bone Cold, you have these sort of big, epic, almost over the top action scenes, immediately followed by the devastation and the emotional fallout from it. And when I was telling the story, I thought those things needed to exist together. I think they needed to be, you needed to see the cause and effect of that.
You did a tremendous job with such a limited budget and shooting time. By the way, you also tortured your crew and your actors. Like, hey, we're going to Maine in February.
Oh yeah, our crew. So I'm from Maine originally, so that's kind of why we ended up back there. And You know,
so you just wanted to see your parents, and you're like, hey, let's make it a tax write-off.
that's 100% correct. Yeah, both of my parents are in the movie. And like we all crashed in my mom's house when we were here. We were filming, like for a big part of it, we were filming kind of in my mom's backyard in the woods. Um, but yeah, man, the crew was mainly from LA, and it was a lot of people who had like never been in the snow before. But you know, we got everyone out there to the woods, and one of the first things we said is like, listen, no one has to like power through this. No, tough this out. If you're uncomfortable, tell us, and we're gonna fix it. We're gonna take care of everybody, because we were literally in the middle of the woods in Maine in the winter, and it was very difficult. You know, we were doing this incredibly complicated project, and you know, we kept it streamlined, so we didn't have a lot of equipment to lug around. That made it harder for our DP, but we just, you know, sort of leaned into the idea that we didn't have anything. Natural light all the way. I think he lit, one of the things I like to say about him is that he lit the entirety of the Maine woods with 4 Kino lights. 4 quasars. So 4 little tubes that were lighting. Those night scenes are all 4 little tubes. And he did an amazing job. He had to really get clever and creative, and he did.
And we need to bring back the Independent Spirit Awards for stuff like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the whole crew is comprised, like the cast and the crew is comprised of people who had been doing a lot of work in Hollywood, and were just like ready for the next big step. And these were a lot like people I knew, some close friends. So I think everyone recognized how special the project was from the beginning, and just pulled out all the stops and did some amazing work. And it really shines a light on everybody.
You know, just hearing that, this is why I'm always so impressed with independent films and smaller budget films, is because you take what you have and you work with it and you tell us a story, versus if you had the $350 million and all it is CG, which I love. Don't get me wrong, I love those movies as well, and we review quite a few of them. But after a while, you're like, "Where's the story?" You know, it's flash and no substance. You know, or what's sizzle and no steak.
Okay. One of the things that frustrates me the most about movies now is just, you know, writing seems to be an afterthought, which is so weird because it comes first. But you know, and I haven't been in the discussions planning a $300 million movie or anything like that. So I'm speaking from well outside of that circle. But yeah, there are things that I see that I'm like, well, that's a script problem. That there's no way this should have gone forward with that issue there. But I mean, you can look at the state of the business at the moment. You know, the writers are striking for a lot of reasons. And my wife is a TV writer, so she'll talk for days about how backwards some things are. But yeah, man, that's something like, it starts with story. You have to start with story, and you carry your story through the hellish production process, whatever it is, whether it's an independent film or it's a $300 million thing. You're protecting this nugget of story.
Do you also think that because we have checklists that we have to go through to add into the story, like I'll give you an example, you know, Ted Lasso, right? Ted Lasso did cross-culturalism throughout the series, but it wasn't a forced cross-culturalism. It just was. This is the people that came internationally to come play in the English Premier League. And so it flowed. Whereas other films like, we need this scene here, this scene here, this scene here for checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. And now we can proceed, even though it doesn't make sense to the story and it adds nothing to the production.
Yeah, I thankfully haven't been in those situations yet. You know, I worked on this show, it was the Legion of Exorcists, which is it's airing right now. It's this Eli Roth thing on Travel Channel. And that one, like, we weren't necessarily given checklist stuff, but we were writing scripts based on true events. So it was very much like, hey, you have to make these cinematic scenes, big story. You have these specific things to work with, these specific, well, I guess goals to hit. So it was a little bit the same. And I do think those challenges just sort of exist in filmmaking anyway. You know, sometimes you lose an actor, so it's like, all right, well, now we have to rewrite this with that actor not in this scene. So you're constantly hit with curveballs like that. But I think to your point, like if you start out with a checklist of things that you have to hit, it would limit you creatively to really flesh out the story, because you're not making the story the main focus. I think if we had done something like that for Bone Cold, it could have crippled it, because it was such a delicate line that you have to walk with something like Bone Cold. If we had checklists to go through, that would have made it a lot tougher.
But that's something you already did, because your cast is already cross-cultural without forcing.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So like Danielle Poblarp.
Yeah, Poblarp.
Yeah, Poblarp. Thank you. I don't know what her ethnicity is. We'll call it ethnic ambiguous. Julie Lopez, Jennifer Khoe. Trinity, Liz Bliss. Like, this is a multicultural cast, but it wasn't shoehorned in. They're just there. This is the spouse. This is the voice of the angel. This is the soldier. This is so and so, and their presence is enough without having to have like shine the light on Juliet, for example, and going Hispanic soldier, and like she had to have a Mexican accent because she's Mexican American. Like, she's there. We see who she is, and she's represented.
Yeah, I think one of the first conversations that I had with our producer Jacqueline Moore, we said, all right, we don't want to have a sea of white people. Like, cool, that's a good place to start. I'm in a multiracial relationship. My wife is Chinese Jamaican, so like my kids are Chinese, and when we were casting the part of Mel, we didn't specify any ethnicity or anything like that. We saw a bunch of people, and Jen came in and just kind of blew us all away. And so we were like, all right, Jen is our Mel. And then we went and cast the daughter. And so we said, okay, we've got to have, a white Chinese multi-ethnic daughter. And it was at that point, I don't think we even really talked about it much anymore. But I mean, I'm glad it's not shoehorned in. I'm glad it's not something that was kind of forced on us. But at the same time, I think there are people that kind of do need it forced on them, because I've been on projects before too where it's a sea of white dudes, and no one's thought to say like, hey, you're not really representing anybody here. And I don't think I would fall into that, but who knows? I would like to have somebody there next to me to say, hey man, you should probably put some women in this, or like something like that.
Right. Well, like if it was a Viking story, we understand it's just all these Nordic looking people.
Right.
If it's an African story, we understand that it's these African looking people. If it's but
exactly.
This is an American story. Let's make it look like America.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think if you're not just sort of instinctively doing that, then you're really missing something. It's such a topic of an important topic of conversation now for movies, independent stuff. The big studios, they know what's going on now. They're going to have those checklists for their projects. Independent films, I still go to festivals and I see movies that are all white people, and obviously no one had that conversation. They probably cast a bunch of their friends that are in the same friend circle, and it's just not it doesn't really represent the country that we live in, especially if it's set in Los Angeles or something. It's just not really representative of what's happening around us. So
like I said, if it advances the story, that's great. If it's just shoehorned in, it doesn't work. And I love the fact that it's not shoehorned in Bone Cold. It just works. It is.
Yeah, it's not about that really, And I will say this too, I hadn't. It like I said, it's not something I did intentionally in the beginning when we cast Jen, but I had a moment of watching this family on screen with the white dad, the Asian mom, and the mixed race baby, and I was like, oh, this is actually cool to see this. This is what my family looks like, and so I kind of realized in that moment the importance of it, and just being aware of it is already a step ahead,
And the story flows. That's what I really care about, is a flowing story.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, when the film comes out on DVD and digital on Tuesday, you know, have you seen like pre-order lists or various reactions from other critics that have spoken to you? And what have some of the other people told you about the film?
So we're just now starting to get some of the reactions in. I haven't seen pre-order lists and stuff, so I'm not sure how it's doing on that front. I hope really well. But you know, we had a couple of premieres. We had our world premiere in New York, and that was a lot of fun from the crowd. But we just had our LA premiere earlier this week on Monday, and that was awesome. That was really encouraging because the most of the people didn't know what to expect from it. They didn't know what the story was. Some of them didn't know what genre it was at all. They just heard me talk about this movie Bone Cold for the last 4 years. And the theater was so engaged in it. There were shrieks and gasps and applause, and you know, the crowd was really genuinely into the movie. And so I said, okay, no, we have something special. I think we've done something really good. You know, we had one fantastic review from a newspaper up in Maine, in the Portland Press Herald. That was really encouraging. And so I think in general, people are, like I said earlier, surprised by it, and happy to be taken along this unexpected ride. So I'm feeling good about it. I know the negative stuff is coming because it just always will. But I don't know. I feel like even with all that, there are people who genuinely, they see what we're doing and appreciate it.
And from what I've noticed, you know, all your other previous work have either been short films or TV series. What's it like to now have a full-length feature film under your belt?
It feels like a different world, man. Like someone told me early on, you know, I was having trouble getting read by anybody. Like the agents and managers wouldn't read my stuff, producers wouldn't read my stuff, and I'm kind of like, I have all this experience, you know, like why isn't anyone reading this? And someone kind of laid it out for me, and they said, no, the world's a different place when you have a feature under your belt. Doesn't matter if it, you know, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't do well. If you've made a feature, that's a different beast. You know, that's its own thing. And so now I'm getting a little momentum in my career, and people want to read my stuff, and people are asking to read stuff. And it really feels like I'm very proud of the other work that I've done, all the TV, all the shorts and stuff. But this really feels like my first big, real professional accomplishment. Not to say that the TV I've done isn't that, but you know, this is my thing. I feel like I've really put myself out to the world for the first time, and I like the work that's going out. So I'm excited about it.
Well, I absolutely enjoyed Bone Cold. You know, I was like, at first, I'll be honest with you, I was like, I was a little hesitant. I was like, do I really need to watch another military movie? But it's not just the military movie. It's not just a horror movie. It's not just the psychological thriller. There's so many layers to this film, and with such a small cast, it keeps you engaged. And when you minimize the dialogue that's going on, the silence becomes awkward because not too many people can sit in silence.
Yeah, you know, from the script level, I knew how important audio is going to be for this movie, because we have, specifically in the first act, there's the one scene where they're stalking the dude, and they're just kind of watching him, waiting for the opportunity to take him out. And it's very intentionally quiet and still and slow, and like you really get this sense that they take their time to do this stuff, because that's what they do, man. They'll park in a spot for like a day and a half until they have an opportunity to fire one bullet, take out their target, then they dip. So that was fascinating to me. But to build out a scene like that, you have to really craft the audio. And I remember our editor and I, our instinct while we were cutting this thing was to like chop those scenes down. And I was like, no, leave it long, leave it fat, because once we get audio in there, that's going to really build out the suspense and atmosphere. And it does. And thankfully, those moments don't get boring. I feel like people are leaning forward in their seats when those are happening, because they're anticipating, and it really ratchets up the tension a lot. But our audio designer, Ian Chase, did an awesome job, like just painting the atmosphere of the woods and everything with sound. And I mean, he's a major guy. He works at Skywalker Sound. He works on all the Marvel stuff. So I think he had just done Everything Everywhere All at Once before he did this one.
A little movie that nobody watched,
Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, it just won an Oscar. I mean,
Yeah, maybe like won an award or two. I don't know.
yeah, a couple here and there. Those local film festival ones.
Exactly. You
No,
might
I
have
love.
heard about it at some point.
Listen, I
Uh,
love film festivals. You guys want me to come to your film festival? I will come to your film festival. I enjoy it so much. Yeah, dude, film festivals are fun. Like, how can you not enjoy yourself at a film festival?
yeah, I have sort of a love-hate thing with film festivals now. Like, I've had the most amazing time at film festivals, and I've also been so angry at film festivals. So it's a little bit of a hit or miss thing. I mean, like, there are people that I've met at film festivals that I still love and I'm still close to. Um, and there are other ones that I hope I never hear their name again because they just made me so angry. But I think you bring your work anywhere. You sort of make yourself vulnerable to that kind of thing, and that's just part of the game.
Well, I'll tell you my little trick. What I do at film festivals as a film critic. So obviously, I get my press pass and I go, but I intentionally dress down.
Mhm.
And like now, I get really bad razor burn, so I don't shave all the time. So sometimes I'll let the scruff grow out like this, and then I'll talk to filmmakers. And if they're actually, polite, genuine people, I will go review their movie. And if they're just rude based on my appearance, I won't watch their film because
Oh,
now
that's smart.
it's based on image versus what you want and what you need quality wise.
That's really smart. That's a really smart way to weed out the assholes in there.
Yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
and the guys that put on the festival know I do this intentionally, and they're like, "All right, Rob's at it again. We get it."
I see what he's doing. Yeah, I had a trick. There's a festival that used to be in Vermont and is now in Minnesota. Uh, and I went like 5 years in a row. I had such an amazing time every year. But what I would do is I would go out to all the parties until like 6 in the morning, and I would drink with everybody, but I'd stop drinking at a certain time, and I would sober up so that I could drive everybody back home. And I made so many friends that way because everyone was like, "Oh my god, thanks for giving me a lift home last night, man!" Like, and you just talk to people the whole time. It just starts conversation, and then you make really good friends with everybody, and you leave with some new colleagues.
And here's also another tip for everybody else going to film festivals: be nice to all the volunteers. These people put their sweat equity into this thing to make it work. So be
Yeah,
nice to these people.
100% yes.
Like, I'm the first people I always greet are the volunteers and then the staff, and they're going to make your life so much easier if you're nice to them. People are like, "Oh, you're not a filmmaker? I'm going to go talk to so and so instead." I'm like, you have no
Yeah,
social human skills.
yeah. I did. So Bone Cold also played the Jacksonville Film Festival this year, and I showed up in Jacksonville, and I was a little like, I think I had just gone on a long drive, and I was a little out of it, and I was like looking for the desk, and they're like, someone came up to me. "Oh, are you Billy Hanson? Here, come right this way. Let me check you in. Here's your bag. Here's all your stuff. Here's where you go. Here's what you do. Here's where your film is playing." And I was like, "Wow, this is amazing." So I complimented them the whole time. I wrote to them after. I was like, "You guys did such an amazing job." Yeah, that those people work very, very hard.
So that's just our tips for going to film festivals: be nice and be
Yeah,
You'll be surprised how much it gets you in life just being decent to people.
just be a nice person. Yeah, yeah,
Don't be an LA type. I
that's
live here in
correct.
Southern California. I make fun of LA all the time.
Oh, same. I live right in the middle of LA, and
Oh,
I will
God
talk
bless
about
you. I
LA
don't know how
people
you
for
do it.
days. I don't know either, man. I've been there. I've been there. 16 years, 17 years.
Like, if I have to go to Studio City or Burbank and it's not like specifically a Disney, Warner, Paramount, Universal film or Sony, I'm not gonna
Mhm.
leave anybody out to not even review a film, but just to see somebody that I know, and I'm like, I better take my headphones because I cannot listen to general conversations. And I'm
No.
because like there's two types of ADD. There's the hyper focused, and then there's the type that you hear everything. And I'm one of those people that hears everything, and I'm like, I got to bring headphones.
You know what's so funny is like I cannot stand to hear people talk about movies most of the time. If I'm just like out and about, I can't. I just get so annoyed at people talking about movies, and I just tune out. But that's LA, man. Everyone's talking about movies, and I just don't want to engage in it. This is great. I'm having a blast right now. But yeah, just like in
We're
general,
also talking about your movie, and we're just having a conversation. I like to have
yeah,
conversation.
yeah. But in general, if my friends are out talking about movies, I just kind of like tune out a little bit, sit back. I'm like, you don't need to hear my opinions on this movie. But
I got you. Yeah, Billy, I do have to ask, where can we find you on social media if we want to connect with you? And what's the elevator pitch for Bone Cold this coming week?
So I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Facebook is just Billy Hanson, and then Instagram it's @aboy Billy. And the elevator pitch for Bone Cold, I always like to pitch it as Predator meets Jacob's Ladder, about a sniper team on a mission in the deep woods of Ukraine, and their mission goes south, and they find themselves pursued by an angry militia and an inhuman creature that stalks them and keeps getting closer and closer.
Listen, you've done a wonderful job with this film. I know you got like 2 more interviews after me, or else I'd keep the conversation going for like another hour. But thank you so much for your time today. Bone Cold comes out from Wellgo USA on Tuesday. What is Tuesday's date?
The 13th.
Tuesday the 13th. Thank you so much. So I didn't have to look at my calendar for that. It's a fantastic film. It's all over the place in a good way, because it keeps you on your toes, and you're going to sit there, and the stuff that you missed, you're going to watch it again and again to figure out everything that you didn't pick up on the first time going through.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.